Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sir Hunt on X as I come to you live from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States of America on this 24th of September 2025. Fall weather is finally here. The humidity's finally gone away here for the summer till next year, obviously. And it was just a wonderful day today that you finally just walk outside without having to worry about the sweltering heat. Because we had a bit of an Indian summer that just came through here in Cincinnati, but looks like it's gone for good now. Uh, Lots to get to here tonight. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful day today. It is about three-fourths of the way to the end of the 2025 calendar year. Year's gone by pretty quick, hasn't it? Certainly has. Now, I was going to touch on some things. Of course, an historical night that took place many years ago. It started the run of one of the iconic figures in not just sports, but also pop culture history. I'll touch on that at the end of the show in my historical segment. But let's get right down to it. It is NFL Week 4 coming up starting tomorrow. So the tomorrow night game obviously is Seattle at Arizona. Seattle just looked overwhelming, but it was the Saints. You don't expect anything less. Arizona got away with one when they actually almost got away with one, but couldn't close a deal when they lost to San Francisco. I expect this time around the Arizona to play much better at home, and I expect Marvin Harrison Jr. to finally get going because he had some terrible drops, and he was just terrible Sunday at San Fran. I think this time with the short turnaround of their home field, I think they take advantage of this opportunity as a home field. Going to be a low-scoring game defensive struggle because both defenses have shown out so far, especially the early part of the season, and I expect Arizona to come out on top and win this game. Probably the 21-17 range around that ballpark. A defensive enough touchdowns to keep it promising, but more on the defensive side of both. I just think Arizona's defense is going to make the stops more than Seattle's defense will. So give me Arizona at home. Now with the international game that's going on overseas, it is Pittsburgh and Minnesota. We know Minnesota just demolished the Cincinnati offense. Albeit a Cincinnati offense, the wheels are about to fall off. Going against a Pittsburgh team who's just 2-1. So they got to 2-1. We'll just leave it as it is. They're just 2-1. I mean, they lit up the Jets for 30 plus, laid an egg at home against Seattle, largely because of the Caleb Johnson miscue on the kickoff that led to the Seahawks touchdown. But got a solid road win in New England. Now they're traveling abroad to face the Minnesota Vikings. And that defense, as I said all along, serious business. You talk about Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave in the middle, Jonathan Greenland out in there along with Andrew Van Ginkel. And, of course, Harrison Smith and the reigning defensive player of the week and Isaiah Rodgers, who just abominated Cincinnati by himself Sunday. This Minnesota defense is serious business, and I expect that momentum to continue. Give me Minnesota. I think this one's going to come down to who makes the defensive stand. Both defenses are stout, but I said all along, when they hire Brian Flores as their defensive coordinator and we have the personnel that they have, it's going to be serious business. They were serious business when they came from behind to beat Chicago, and they showed they were serious business when they abominated Cincinnati. And I expect it to continue over, and I expect them to handle Pittsburgh. Low-scoring game, somewhere in the 16, 14-ish ballpark, but give me Minnesota in this one. And I'll give you my 2 cents on international play after I'm done with the scheduling. Now to the States and the early game slates. Washington and Atlanta. Of course, the debate is Virginia Daniels going to play. Going against an Atlanta team who was basically just goose-egged when they played the Carolina Panthers. And I expect Washington, who came off a real impressive win, to continue. Doesn't matter who's a quarterback. I think Washington is going to handle business. About a medium scoring type game. Give me Washington on the road. I think they find a way to get their season going. Doesn't matter who's playing a quarterback for them, but I think Washington is going to win. I'm going to touch on this whole QB controversy in Atlanta after my pick segment also. Real quick, shout out Josh Isles. I just see you pop in here. Hope you're doing good. I look forward to meeting you here real soon. Of course, the Chargers and the Giants. Big news this week, of course, the starting of Jackson Dart. But we know the Giants is a clown show going against one of the better teams right now in the early part of the season. We talk about the Los Angeles Chargers and that defense and Justin Herbert. That offense, they lost Najee Harris, but Omarion Hampton was going to get the snaps anyways at some point. So now here's his chance to show his stuff. Cross-country trip, but we consider they're playing the Giants. I don't think that's going to matter. Give me the Chargers on the road. This one, I think, will be convincing. The Titans and the Texans in Houston, both teams 0-3. Basically, it's a different view of 0-3 when you look at it because Tennessee wasn't really going anywhere to begin with. But Houston is a disappointment because they were the favorite to win the South, and rather convincingly, too. C.J. Stroud just hasn't gotten the protection from the offensive line. If you know, they made an investment to retool that offensive line, sent Laramie Tunsil out the door, got guys like Cam Robinson, among others. But it's still the same story. They can't protect C.J. Stroud. And the Texans are averaging an abysmal 13 points per game, which is not going to cut it in the NFL. But in this case, on their home field, Houston does enough to get the win. It's going to be one of those ugly type games where nobody's going to make any real explosive plays, but someone's just going to muck them up and get a W. But I think in this case, it's going to be the Texans. And we'll see where it goes from there. A way to salvage their season, at least at this part of it. The big one in Tampa Bay, the battle of the unbeatens. Tampa Bay and Philadelphia. Philadelphia hasn't looked all that great. Of course, the game last week when they stole one from the Rams because the Rams just handed to them on the silver platter, they stopped playing to win. I mean, after they were up 26-7, they stopped playing to win. They were playing not to lose. Kudos to Philly for taking advantage of it. But right now, who has a more clutch gene in the NFL at the quarterback position than Baker Mayfield, given what he's done with 3 wins and 3 consecutive game-winning drives? Granted, they're not going to have either Mike Evans, but they said Chris Godwin was a full participant, which I found interesting. But he has a standout, Emeka Egbuka, who's just absolutely killing it right now. And if you have him on your fantasy team, kudos, because he's probably a lot of points for you guys. And I expect that combination to win out for Tampa Bay, because in recent years, Baker Mayfield has had Philadelphia's number. I expect that to continue this week. Philadelphia, even though they are 3-0, hasn't looked particularly great in any of their 3 games. And they're playing a Tampa team who's basically finding ways to win at the right time. And I expect the same thing to happen here again. They'll make the plays necessary to get the win. Tampa goes to 4-0. And it might be time to start taking Tampa as a serious NFC contender. I'll touch on that at the after my pick segment. The Panthers and the Patriots. I think the Panthers had their 5 minutes of glory last week when they beat the Atlanta Falcons. Playing a New England team who's sort of been a disappointment so far at 1-2. Both of their losses at home, but they break this. They get off the schneid here. This time, I think it'll be a close game, but I think this time New England gets over the hump and wins at home. They're just going to either stop trying to throw to Stephon Diggs. They just need to throw it to other receivers because Stephon Diggs is offering nothing right now, and he's just basically useless. The Saints and the Bills, nothing much to say. This one will probably be over by halftime. Bills at home. This one is going to be nasty. This has to make it one of those 60-0 ball games because Buffaloes are so good, and the Saints are just not that good. Shout out Zach Peters. I just saw you pop in here. Miss you, my dude. Cleveland at Detroit. This Cleveland defense is serious business. I mean, what they've done so far for the this early part of the season is they're serious business. I mean, they put the clamps on the Cincinnati offense. They put the clamps on Green Bay's offense. Sunday managed to get a win. And they're going to have to play over their heads against probably the most explosive offense in the NFL at the moment in Detroit, who can beat you in so many ways. And they showed when they just hung almost 100 points combined against Chicago and Baltimore, respectively. Cleveland does everything they can to keep this competitive, but they don't have the offensive firepower to keep up with Detroit. Give me Detroit at home, although Cleveland makes it more interesting than people think. I think Detroit just pulls away in the end. Just too much firepower on offense and just enough on defense to where they're playing against one of the worst offenses in the league, but that's not going to matter. Give me Detroit over Cleveland. That's the early slate. Now to the 4 o'clock slate. Jacksonville at San Francisco. San Fran just decimated by injuries. And Jacksonville, even though they're 2-1, hasn't been all that good. I mean, not the supposed rift between Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. Of course, there was a play a couple weeks ago in Cincinnati where Thomas Jr. had the wide open look and couldn't make the catch out of a nice place pass by Trevor Lawrence. Against a San Fran team who's just banged up. Of course, now it's revealed that Nick Bosa is out for the season. Probably going to look to try and replace him at the receiver position at the deadline. But on this case, I think San Fran goes to 4-0 on their home field. They'll find a way to get it done. San Fran wins. They just have just enough of this two to get it done. But give me San Fran at home, albeit it's going to come down to a game-winning field goal either way. The Colts and the Rams. Daniel Jones is cooking right now against a Rams defense who was basically been on fire until they just caved into the final minutes against Philadelphia. Obviously, Indiana hasn't been really pushed yet, so we're going to find out how good they really are against this defense, which is lights out. Byron Young, Jared Verse, and Brandon Fisk, just to name a few of these guys on the defensive front. This one will be close and competitive also, but do give me the Rams at home. Daniel Jones has been a real feel-good story, taking advantage of the opportunity that was given to him by the Indianapolis Colts when they signed him to the contract, overtaking Anthony Richardson, and he's been basically near perfect. I mean, what can you say? But at the same time, give me at home the Los Angeles Rams. Going to be a very darn good one. Daniel Jones has made the most of it, but this is going to be the stiffest defense he's going to face so far in the early season. So we'll find out. I think this one might be one of the better games of the afternoon. The Bears and the Raiders, neither team really going anywhere, but I think Las Vegas finally gets a win at home. I think they finally find a way to get Alshon Jeffrey going. That's going to be the big thing. They find a way to get Alshon Jeffrey going because that's what they need to do. And the Raiders defense has been absolutely, until last week when they got shredded by Marcus Mariota, has been solid for the most part. But do give me this Raiders at home, albeit that one, it's going to be a 21-17 type game. The big one, of course, is my Baltimore at Kansas City. Loser goes to 1-3. But let me remind both teams of something here real quick. I don't think this is not the game that makes or breaks either of your seasons. I mean, both of you guys are going to be fine in the end because both Baltimore and Kansas City, both fan bases are basically saying, if we lose, it's over. No, that's not going to happen. It's not the make or break for either of you guys when it comes to the rest of the season because you had some tough beginnings when you look at the first 3 games of both your schedules. But the story here, I think Kansas ekes it out. I mean, they found something as the Giants game went on. I think that carries over to this particular Sunday afternoon tilt in Kansas City. I think this one has the makings of a 31-28 type ball game. I think Kansas finds a way to get some offense going against a Baltimore defense who, for some reason, doesn't want to show up so far. I mean, ever since the halftime of Buffalo, they've basically just taken a nap. And I'm not giving them credit for the defense against Cleveland because it was the worst offense in the league. But again, the second half against Buffalo and the whole game against Detroit, they decided to just take a nap. And going against Kansas, I think Kansas ekes this one out at home. Albeit this one I think is going to be about a touchdown difference either way. It's going to be a pretty darn good one. And the big one Sunday night in Dallas. We know what this one is all about. The Green Bay Packers going to Dallas. Micah Parsons returns to Big D. And I expect him to just basically have a personal party and just have the time of his life. Because Dallas is going to have their hands full, and with no CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens already blowing up, good luck. And you know Micah Parsons would love nothing more than to stick it to Jerry Jones for how Jerry Jones mistreated him, how Jerry Jones just verbally destroyed him and abused him the way that he did, and unprofessionally treat him during the whole negotiation before the trade happened. Micah Parsons is going to stick that dagger right to Jerry Jones, and I expect Micah Parsons to have a giant day Sunday at Dallas, and the Green Bay Packers, who offensively laid an egg in Cleveland, bounces back, and handles Kip Dallas. And I don't think this one is going to be close. And Micah Parsons is going to have a field day out there. Good luck trying to slow him down. He had this game circled on his calendar the day he was traded to Green Bay. Don't think for 1 second he knows the story. They're going to try and downplay it, rightfully and understandably so. But anybody with a brain knows this is the game Micah Parsons wants, and he's going to make the most of it. And Green Bay wins this one convincingly and going away. And now to the two Monday night games. A pair of duds, more than likely. Start with the Jets and the Dolphins. Both teams 0-3. But by default at home, give me Miami. They have neither team's going anywhere. We know the wheels have fallen off with the Dolphins. Jets are in gradual retool mode. But Miami, I think, takes this one at home. Tua versus Justin Fields. Give me Tua. That's a difference. But it's not really saying much anyways. And, of course, the Monday night tilt in Denver, the Bengals and the Broncos. Denver's coming off the tough loss to the Chargers, with actually two tough losses on the road at Indy and at Los Angeles, where they had both games won, and they just let them slip for whatever reason. But that's not happening here. They're going home to a Bengals team the wheels have fallen off there also. Remember what happened? Remember last year in that game in Cincinnati, that Denver defense just beat up the offensive line of the Cincinnati Bengals, but that was Joe Burrow. This time it's Jake Browning, and this is going to be a potential massacre if the Bengals aren't careful. The Broncos will win at home, and I think this one has the potential to get real ugly. And I'm going to touch on the Bengals here in a second. So those are the picks for the late night and the primetime games for Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, and Monday. Now to a few topics, as I talked about through the schedule. There's a few things that need to be discussed. International play has become a joke. Anybody with a brain knows these players don't want to go abroad. And the NFL can't care less about player safety. And they know why we don't know why this is happening. I mean, they did the one time a year for, London for the longest time. One a year against really two teams who were basically bottom feeders, you want to call it that. Now you're seeing teams go multiple games with multiple teams going abroad, not just to London, because, of course, now the one Sunday, Pittsburgh and Minnesota is going to Dublin. Of course, earlier one, Kansas and the Chargers to Brazil. I don't have a problem with Brazil, but I had a problem with division rivals being the Chiefs and the Chargers, who are going to be challenging for the AFC West crown, going to Brazil. Why would you have a division rival on an international platform? That belongs in either Kansas or LA. That's one thing. International play has almost ruined the product of the NFL. And there's a few more coming up this year. I think one's going to Germany. Supposed to be one in Spain at some point. And now they're talking about going to Australia, which is a 12-hour difference from the States to Australia, especially from my part of the States to Australia. What's gained out of a trip across the country or across the Atlantic or the Pacific or whatever? Nothing. I mean, it's already a global product. Everybody watches it anyways, especially now these days with the advantage of free streaming technology, et cetera, et cetera. What's gained out of sending players across to other countries where they don't want to go to? Because God knows how many of these players really want to go across the country. Nothing's gained out of it. And they talk about player safety. Now they're talking about adding an 18th game. Stop it with the player safety at this point, because the NFL, you just reeled your butt on the side again, saying you care about player safety when you really don't. Sending players where they shouldn't be, talking about extra games. Good luck with us. I mean, if you're talking about this as an eventual cash flow, I get it. But there's other ways you could have done about it than just send players and games across out of the United States into other parts of the country, especially a high-level division rival that we had week one in Brazil between the Chiefs and the Chargers. Guess the Chargers was a designated home team for that one. That game belonged in L.A., not Brazil. These games belong in the States. It's always an American-first sport, and that's how it's always going to be. I get the NFL wants to globalize the product. There's other ways you could have done it without having games sent overseas, because the players don't like it. I mean, they'll probably say they do just to save face, but deep down, They don't. That's subject number one. Subject number two, the ongoing controversy in Atlanta between the quarterbacks. Of course, Michael Penix was benched for Kirk Cousins. Does it mean you stick with Kirk Cousins? No. You made the investment to Michael Penix Jr. You better stick with it. Why? Because you drafted 8th overall. I mean, you didn't draft the guy 8th overall to piggyback off of Kirk Cousins, who basically just fell off the map after he blew his Achilles a couple years ago when he was in Minnesota. And when you announce this guy as a starter, you can't just back away from it. It's too late. I said the guy, Kirk Cousins, basically played just simply because the game was out of hand. It wasn't because of anything else. He made some decent plays, but it doesn't get him or Atlanta anywhere. But the Falcons should and will stick to Michael Penix Jr. unless something unforeseen happens, God forbid. But to go to Kirk Cousins at this point just makes zero sense because you made the investment to get Penix. You drafted him 8th overall, and they're going to stick with him. And they should, because the backlash would be not all good if they go to Kirk Cousins. And let's remind people, when Kirk Cousins was signed by Atlanta before the 2024 season, and they drafted Michael Penix Jr., Cousins wasn't hip with it. And it was, of course, caught viral across the NFL social media platforms. So that's I'll tell you right there who the Falcons should go to. They're in a retooling phase themselves because, the last couple of years, they haven't gone anywhere. So your best bet right now is to stick to Michael Penix Jr. I know the guy laid an egg in Carolina last week, but stick to him. And over here in Cincinnati, once again, Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media have more sick obsessions than the average psychopath. Now they want the team to trade for Russell Wilson or Kirk Cousins or even a Jameis Winston. This is a byproduct of what I told you for the last 4 years. Yeah, I'm not going to rehash that again because it's wasting the time. But you're getting what you asked for right now because you invested in Orlando Brown Jr., and the guy can't block a statue to save the life of a quarterback. Ask Chiefs fans of what happened in the 2022 divisional game when they played Jacksonville and he got Patrick Mahomes hurt. It doesn't matter who you get on the bring from whatever roster. I mean, you can find the corpse of the prime Dan Marino. You can find the corpse of a prime Joe Montana. You can bring Johnny Unitas from the dead. You can find a way to bring Otto Graham from the dead. It doesn't matter because with that roster and that offensive line, nobody's going to get the job done. Your season is toast. Forget it. Your best bet is to simply let the wheels fall off on the season and just do this whole thing all over again. Why? Because you're not getting anywhere simply because that was done the day Joe Burrow was injured. The season was done. I mean, I think you want to make the playoffs with Joe Burrow, but it's basically a formality at this point. Your best bet now is to accept it as it is. Quit acting like you're getting quarterbacks. Trading for quarterbacks is going to help you guys out because it's not. They're going to stick with Jake Browning, and your best bet is to ride with Jake Browning, win or loss. I mean, I get it. Jake Browning was a beyond pitiful Sunday in Minnesota. Yes, he was. But that's part of what you get with him. You're gonna take the bad with the good, just stick it out with him, support him, back him. Doesn't mean you're gonna get wins. Who knows? Doesn't mean you're gonna get losses, more than likely. But it doesn't mean turn your back on him and ask for another quarterback. Because anybody that they bring in is more likely not going to start anyways. I mean, Russell Wilson's not going to start over Jake Browning. Neither is Jameis Winston or Kirk Cousins. There's a reason why those three are in the situations they're in. That's what you guys miss. And you think those three are going to come in and save the Bengals season? Look at that offensive line. Look at what the bad investments you made. Right now, the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media have found a way to plummet as bad as the stocks of Enron did 25 years ago. And we know what happened to Enron when they crashed and burned. Bengals fans and Cincinnati media, your best bet is to crash and burn right now because karma came knocking on your door. You're getting what you deserve. You all made that bid. Now you can go lie in it. I never thought I'd live to see the day where you guys would complain about quarterbacks as bad as Browns fans do. You guys found a way to be even worse. And that's a sad story. I'll touch on that another day. Actually, two more things on the NFL front before I proceed. Everybody talks about this week 3 and MVP talk. Can everybody just cool it? You don't determine MVPs after week 3. We have people thinking week week 3 is going to depend who's going to win the MVP at the end of the season. It doesn't. But, one thing I like about so far this early season is some real intriguing stories. I mean, Arizona's bounced back real nicely. San Fran finding a way to go 3-0. Baker Mayfield continues to ascend after the debacle in Cleveland to a top 12 quarterback. Justin Herbert, after the playoff loss in Houston, and he was just absolutely abysmal. He found a way to redeem himself a little bit. The Micah Parsons thing with going to Green Bay to Dallas. Green Bay's defense is absolutely lights out. I know the offense crapped the bed in Cleveland last week, but that defense is lights out. Daniel Jones, look at what he's done since he signed a contract and was given a starting job in Indy. He's made the most of it. He probably a better team around him than he ever had in New York. But, of course, when you have targets like Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr., and Tyler Warren, that's going to help a lot. And, of course, the big game, Sunday, Baltimore, Kansas City. I say this again to both Ravens fans and Chiefs fans. This is not make or break for you guys this season. Both of you guys are going to be fine regardless. Chiefs fans saying if they lose, they don't make the playoffs. Same thing with Ravens fans. No, that's not going to make the breaker of it. It's going to be a pretty darn good game. Maybe a factor when it comes to home field and playoff seedings, but it won't make or break either season for whoever loses. It's going to be a dandy of a game, as these two have shown the last 2 years, and I expect another dandy Sunday. Now that concludes my NFL segment. Shout out Howard Gaddis. I just see you pop in here. Hope all is good with you. Look forward to talking to you soon. Now to the world of boxing. And when you talk about the phrase coming out party, and there's a lot of that in our sport, especially in the heavyweight division all time. Maybe the one that set off and was the beginnings of historical significance and a dramatic off-the-chain run started 90 years ago today at Yankee Stadium. The world was introduced to a fighter named Joe Louis, a.k.a. the Brown Bomber. In his first big fight on a big stage, he faces Max Bear. Now we are 3 months removed from Max Bear being stunned by the Cinderella Man, James J. Braddock, in the upset of the year, when Braddock just gave Bear a boxing lesson and won a unanimous decision to win the heavyweight title from Bear, who goes into this fight as the former champ and the toughest foe Joe Louis has fought up to this point. And lots of questions about this when it comes to Joe Louis, but in front of the biggest stage of them all at Yankee Stadium, Joe Louis did not disappoint. And the world was introduced to the Brown Bomber, and he showed why. We talk about this particular fight. The residue from what happened from Max Bear when he lost to James J. Braddock carried over, and Joe Louis took advantage of it. Basically, the deceptive quickness of Joe Louis and the beautiful footwork he always displayed showed in the early rounds, as just like James J. Braddock did to Max Bear, Louis made a carbon copy of it. Bear had no answers. Even for a moment when Bear had Louis pinned against the ropes in the second round, couldn't get off. Joe Louis did anything and everything he wanted to. And in the third round, that stiff jab, which nobody talks about with Joe Louis, started to do damage to Bear. Bear couldn't even get going. And the left hooks of Joe Louis started to hurt Bear, floored him twice in the second round. Once in the second, once in the third. And basically, as the round 3 comes to an end, Joe Louis starts to step up his attack, and Max Bear is on survival mode. But the bell saves Max Bear, and Joe Louis has pitched a 3-0 shutout so far. And we go to the fourth round, where Joe Louis said, "The heck with it, I'm getting this guy out of here," and that's what he did. The trademark triple left hook at the third round. Basically, the third punch put Bear on one knee, and basically Bear just stayed on one knee, got up, and basically if the ref said he wanted to continue, Bear said no, and the coming out party came for the Brown Bomber Joe Louis 90 years ago, when he just systematically broke down and destroyed the tough, durable Max Bear in 4 rounds, and probably what he called himself his finest performance. And it was a thing of beauty. People know him for that lethal right cross, especially the one that Pace and Max Schmeling in their rematch in 1938. But his ability, his ring IQ, his natural ability to use a jab, the footwork, and the ring IQ, his awareness in the ring is what separated Joe Louis from a lot of fighters from this night when he beat Max Bear all the way to the end of 1949, where he ruled the roost of the heavyweight division for that time. Nobody was touching Joe Louis for that time. Yes, he lost to Max Schmeling in the first fight because he, by his own admission, he came underprepared, but gave Schmeling his due in 1936. But we know what happened in 1938, 2 years later. The bum rush beat down in one round by Joe Louis in the greatest revenge in boxing history when he just destroyed Max Schmeling inside out. But from this night, we talk about when he obliterated Max Bear to when he became the champion a year later when he beat James J. Braddock, and the 25 successful title defenses that ended in 1949. Nobody was beating Joe Louis, and a record that's not going to be touched maybe ever. Not just in this lifetime, but maybe at least the next 70 lifetimes after this, because there's a lot of reasons I can get into, especially in the political aspect of the sport, but not using a platform to discuss it tonight. It's about the world being introduced to one of the premier icons in sports, not just sports history, but in all of pop culture. And that's what Joe Louis was. He became an instant icon shortly after this, especially after when he obliterated Max Schmeling in the rematch, given everything that happened in and out of the ring with both fighters in that circumstance. But the coming out party for Joe Louis started 90 years ago today at Yankee Stadium when he took Max Bear, who was just removed from losing to James J. Braddock, and Louis first gave him a boxing lesson, stepped up the aggression, delivered a beating to where Max Bear just basically quit. That's what Joe Louis was at the end of the day. And we talk about his legacy. To me, hands down, the number two greatest heavyweight of all time behind Muhammad Ali. I mean, the guy, you argue number one. I'm not going to fight it. But it was the greatest before Ali came around. But below Louis is a significant gap for the rest of the field in the heavyweight division. The rest of it, y'all can have at it, because it's always going to be Joe Louis over all of those guys. Because that, when you talk about 12 years and 25 successful title defenses of the heavyweight championship in the one belt era, that was Joe Louis. We talk about Mount Rushmore and the upper echelon of all-time great pound for pound. Virtually everybody's top five. I mean, if he's not your top five, you better have a valid reason for it. Because I said, although my Mount Rushmore was Sugar Ray Robinson, Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis, and Henry Armstrong. Why? They have records that are never going to be touched. And maybe the most, you could probably argue the most unbreakable in the sport of boxing, at the very least, was when Joe Louis reigned world champion from 1937 to 1949. Started when he obliterated James J. Braddock to win the title, all the way to when he knocked out Jersey Joe Walcott in 1949 in a rematch. But everyone first heard of Joe Louis because he was introduced to the boxing world 90 years ago today at Yankee Stadium, September 24th, 1935, when he just first boxed off Max Bear and then just beat the brakes off of him once he knew Bear was ready to go. Systematic, clinical, methodical, piece by piece, punch for punch. Max Bear was in over his head. And we consider what happened to Bear after losing to Braddock and the residue that came over. You had a feeling that was going to happen. And Joe Louis made darn sure of it. And the world was introduced to a phenomenal pop culture icon for many reasons. Now we talk about coming out parties in the heavyweight division, and there's a lot of them. And this one, you can probably see Louis had probably 3 or 4 of these. I mean, not just what he did at Max Bear 90 years ago. Fast forward to about a year and a half later, when he won the title from James J. Braddock, after coming up from the canvas and systematically breaking Braddock down, you can say that one also. The finest hour for him was a second Schmeling fight. That's a no-brainer. But the coming out party was for him, Max Bear. Some people could also say the Braddock fight, because that's when the 12-year run started. Of course, you talk about heavyweight coming out parties. Cassius Clay, 8-1 underdog against Sonny Liston. Down at Miami Beach, where Ali just boxed Liston's ears off to where Liston was quitting on the stool. And that image of Sonny Liston quitting on the stool Still one of the more jaw-dropping mysteries in boxing history. And the greatest was born, Cassius Clay. And we know what he said in the interview. I'm the king of the world. I'm pretty. I'm a bad man. Clay Liston won. Certainly wasn't the coming out party for Cassius Clay. Actually, when you think of Sonny Liston, what he did to Floyd Patterson, the first of their two fights, just blowing him out in one round, showing the whole world why he was the feared man for the longest time before Clay beat him. And Floyd Patterson was rolling, especially after that trilogy with Ignar Johansson. But Sonny Liston just blasted him in one round, and the world it was introduced two of the most feared figures in the history of the heavyweight division. Even Mike Tyson said, I wasn't as scary as Sonny Liston. I mean, Sonny Liston was naturally scary, especially when he did to Floyd Patterson. That's what made Cassius Clay making Sonny Liston quit on the stool the night of February 25, 1964, that much more remarkable. Fast forward several years after that. Big George Foreman, January 22, 1973 in Kingston, Jamaica. We know the story of this one. Just pulverized Joe Frazier, floored him 6 times in less than 4.5 minutes. I mean, after the first uppercut that floored him, it was basically over. Joe Frazier tried and had no answers for this machine. I mean, this Foreman-Frazier one was the irresistible force versus the immovable object, perception-wise. George Foreman on this night was the irresistible force and the immovable object because he kept coming and Frazier had no answers. That was Foreman-Frazier one. And we talk about coming out parties, maybe the biggest, because Foreman is becoming the heavyweight champion of the world as a 4-1 underdog, and the way he just effortlessly demolished Joe Frazier, was something unforeseen. So that was a coming out party. Evander Holyfield as a heavyweight when he knocked out Adelson Rodriguez, because the hype was Holyfield versus Tyson and whether Holyfield could compete with a Mike Tyson. When he blasted Adelson Rodriguez in 2 rounds to become the number 1 contender, all the mouths were shut, and the 7-year build-up for Holyfield-Tyson began. Lennox Lewis in his own home country of 1992 against Donovan Razor Ruddock, the heavyweight title eliminator to fight the Holyfield-Bowe winner. Basically a pick-em fight because Razor Ruddock had those 2 tough fights with Mike Tyson, had the experience. Lennox Lewis just dusted Ruddock off as if Ruddock had no business being in the ring with him. And we know the history of the legacy of Lennox Lewis from that point forward. Larry Holmes, when he won the title from Ken Norton, especially that 15th round, where basically whoever won the 15th round won the fight. Larry Holmes buckled down, won the 15th round to win the heavyweight title. And you know the story of the Larry Holmes ring. 7.5 years, 20 successful title defenses. That's a coming out party in the heavyweight division. And when Floyd Patterson first won the heavyweight title from Archie Moore, and vacated, and then regained it from Ignar Johansson. But you can also say Ignar Johansson had his coming out party when he blasted Floyd Patterson out in the first fight, where he just, every time he hit him, he floored Patterson. That's coming out parties in the heavyweight division. And those are probably the most significant, maybe ever, the ones that stand out. Because in the heavyweight division back then, it was more the it division. I mean, it was the theory. If you come out and the sport rode out the heavyweight division, and if you come out with the eye-popping performance in that weight class, you won it all. Even if you didn't win a title, you still won it all, because the glamour division was the heavyweight division in the sport. And we talk about what Joe Louis did 90 years ago to Max Bear, what Cassius Clay did to Sonny Liston in their first fight, what Liston did is Floyd Patterson in their first fight, what Lennox Lewis did to Razor Ruddock, what George Foreman did to Joe Frazier in their first fight. Those coming out parties stand out. I should add what Evander Holyfield did to Adelson Rodriguez. Those coming out parties stand out as heavyweights. And when you can piggyback off of that to historical significance like they did, you know, at the end of the day, you was introduced to the world when you have that kind of performance. We have those in other weight classes. We do. We have those in a lot of weight classes. But when you did it at the heavyweight division like those guys did, you were it. And you were it forever. Etched in history. But it was 19 years ago. The the world was introduced to Joe Louis when he just bombed. Back up. When he just systematically broke down, then beat down, then made Max Bear quit, and in a fight that elevated him to the contender status of the heavyweight division. And from that point forward, you wouldn't walk the streets and not talk boxing without mentioning the name Joe Louis. Because 90 years ago today at Yankee Stadium, they saw the beginnings of an iconic legend. Great, he didn't win the world title on this night. It was a non-title fight, but it was important because he had to climb up the ranks against a former champ who just lost his title. But that was what Joe Louis did. And his coming out party was when he just starched and beat down Max Bear. A lot more heavyweight coming out parties, obviously. But for the most significant ones, the ones I mentioned were it. We're not going to have a heavyweight division like that maybe ever again. When you can make the statement as a heavyweight back in the from the 30s all the way back to basically the cutoff point was the end of 99 when the two Lewis Holyfield fights took place. You made a statement like that in the heavyweight division and you was introduced to the world. You did something and you remember forever. That was the heavyweight division. It's always been the old adage. The sport went as a heavyweight division went. And that's why when you had those coming out parties, like Joe Louis, Cassius Clay, Sonny Liston, Ignacio Hansen, Floyd Patterson, George Foreman, and Evander Holyfield, and among others, you did something right. That was when the heavyweight division and the sport was fun. And it was all about wanting to be great and daring to be great. Put the challenge out there, they accepted it, and they made the most of it. Fun times. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sir Hunt on X. I will be back tomorrow night. For those that missed this particular show, you can catch the audio replays on the Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify apps. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in all walks of life. Take care of yourself first before you take care of anything else. If you take care of yourself first and foremost, all the good things come your way. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. Take care of you, focus on you, and all the good things will follow. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless. Enjoy the evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.